Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Narcissism is one of the greatest mental diseases of our time. By no means the only one, but one that's really gained a lot in our awareness, in our popularity, especially with the rise of social media. Most social media commentators have been paying attention to this, to what has now been rated as a disorder. In fact, we have narcissistic personality disorder, and its influence has been greatly championed by all our social media apps, Instagram, you name it, TikTok, all of that, where everybody wants to be and show how special they are, how unique they are, how great they are. And it truly is a disease, I think, that all of us can fall into. It's one that, when I get on here, I have to be very careful because it's easy to fall prey to this kind of thinking that somehow I'm special. So from our partners to our bosses to our parents, many of us have been tormented in relationships of one kind or another, where we found ourselves in the presence of narcissistic people that we may even have looked up to and admired until they revealed their true colors. When narcissism becomes a disorder, we can recognize it by 9 symptoms that have the acronym special me. See, we tend to label everyone or so many people as narcissistic, but real narcissists have very, very specific symptoms. And I'd like for you to become aware of those, just so that you're not using that term loosely. So the first is a sense of self-importance. I am somehow very special, very important. A preoccupation with power, beauty, or success. A feeling of entitlement. They can only be around people who are important or special. They are somehow interpersonally exploitative for their own gain. That means they'll meet with people only who they can get something from. They're arrogant. They lack empathy. They must be admired. They are envious of others or believe that others are envious of them. What then is the antidote for narcissism? Psychologists will give you a wide range of causes, symptoms, and solutions, but today I will speak of only one powerful yet rarely talked about and a time-tested solution: the cultivation of humility. Some might think of humility as weakness, but that is the furthest thing from the truth. Humility means understanding the fundamental nature of reality. Humility means open-mindedness, curiosity, knowing that you do not know everything and never will. Knowing that no matter how smart, beautiful, or wealthy you might be, everything will be lost in time. Humility means knowing at the core of your being that you are but a tiny, minuscule particle in an infinitesimally vast universe. You are alive for a short while. And no matter how powerful, rich, or influential you are, everything you have and achieve will be lost and forgotten in a brief span of time. Your life might feel like it lasts 100 years, but 100 years is nothing in comparison to the thousands of years that humans have been around. So how is humility cultivated? It begins with opening your mind to learn the truth from those who are wise and enlightened. Only one who has awakened to this truth of who we are, as we described, can impart it to others. It changes your goals, your life purpose, and the way you live your life. Traditionally, there were 2 places where you began your journey: your parents, assuming they had learned the truth and were wise, and the guru or enlightened, self-realized being. In today's episode of the Bhagavatam, we will observe how even the Supreme Being, Sri Krishna, showed us by his example this divine path just to inspire us. just to go over the backstory of the Bhagavatam and where we've reached up till now. We're on the 10th Canto, chapter number 45. And we're going to be talking about, well, let me first catch up. So we'd been over this part of the story. It started from the time when Vasudeva and Devaki had just got married, and the brother of Devaki was driving them on his chariot, and he heard this message in the sky which said that, a voice that said that Devaki's son was going to kill him. At that time, he got ready to kill her, and instead of killing her, he ended up imprisoning her. And then after he killed 6 of her children, when the 7th was a miscarriage, the 8th one was Krishna, and he was Vishnu himself, the supreme being who had incarnated just to annihilate the miscreants in this world. So that was, the big event that had occurred. And then Vasudeva and Devaki, who were in jail, they had their child, taken out of the jail, because Vishnu had told them that if you just, go, the gates will open, I can let you out. So they had finally taken the baby across the river to the home of Nanda and Yashoda. And their mother Yashoda brought up Krishna. Vasudeva and Devaki continued in jail for 17 long years. This is Krishna with his father Nanda, Krishna and his brother Balaram. And then eventually Krishna came to the place where his birth father and mother were imprisoned, and killed the king who had imprisoned them and who had been torturing everyone. His name was Kans. This same Kans was a tyrant, and ultimately Krishna freed his parents, Devaki and Vasudeva, from the jail. And it is from that point that we resume our story. Now, understanding that his parents were becoming... So now as Krishna interacted with his parents, he began to realize, because they had seen him kill the great King Kans, they had seen him kill the big elephant Kovalyapid, they had seen him break this gigantic arrow, and Krishna was all of 11 years old, right? So they were starting to become aware of his transcendental opulences and qualities. They had begun to realize that he might be the supreme personality of Godhead. And so Krishna thought that this should not be allowed to happen. He then expanded his Yogamaya, which bewilders his devotees. Now, there is Mahamaya, which bewilders us. That is the illusion that creates our reality. You see, all of us think this world is real. And then there are some philosophers who tell you this world is not real, that this is Maya, this is all an illusion, nothing is real out here. Well, the fact of the matter is both statements are true. This world is an illusion, because even if viewed under an electron microscope, you will notice that between the protons and atoms, within the atom, amidst the protons, the quarks and all of that, there is just air. 99.9% of what you view under that electron microscope is just air. So 99.9% of everything you're looking at is nothing. So on one hand, it is an illusion. That is true. But on the other hand, it's a very real illusion. You go stand in front of a truck or a car and you will be run over and die. There is no getting around that. These days we're trying to create all these virtual reality headsets and try to create all these augmented reality. It's quite the thing now. But we're already living in a virtual reality world. In fact, it's so real that you can touch it, that you can see, you can hear, you can do all of that, which those machines are trying to do. But we're already doing that. This is a far more sophisticated virtual reality device than anything that any human will ever make. And it's been around thousands of years. Now, that illusion that we see around us is called Maya. All of this world. All of this is the energy of God turning into trees, into mountains, into lakes, into houses, into rivers, into human beings, into animals, into insects. It's all that same energy of God turning into all these creatures and beings and places. All of it is dissolved at some time, and all of it is created at another. And this keeps happening. It's not just a one-time event. On the other hand, there's what's called Yogamaya. And Yogamaya only exists in Krishna's pastimes. And the Supreme Lord himself comes, then Yogamaya is that very special illusion that is created to facilitate his lila, his pastimes. So in this case, Krishna did not want his parents to know that he is the Supreme Being. Why? Because if they did, they could not relate to him as their child. If Vasudeva and Devaki could have seen Krishna as Almighty God, their intense love for him as their son would have been spoiled. And Krishna did not want this. Rather, he wanted to enjoy with them the ecstatic love of Vatsalya Ras. Vatsalya Ras means parental love, the loving relationship between parents and children. Although we normally think of God as the Supreme Father, in Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness, we can enter into the Supreme Lord's pastimes and play the part of his parents and love him just as our own child. Or we can love him as our friend or as our lover. There are many ways to love God. But all of these forms of love are extremely intense and beautiful. Right? So, Krishna approached his parents with his elder brother, humbly bowing his head to offer respect. Just like that. Bowed before them. Now you see, this is humility. Krishna is showing us humility, practically. We talked about humility in the beginning, and I talked about how important the cultivation of humility is. So here we see him with his parents. Krishna said, "Dear Father, because of us, your two sons, you and Mother Devaki, have lived in constant anxiety and could not enjoy our childhood, boyhood, or youth. Deprived by fate, we could not live with you and enjoy the pampered happiness most children enjoy in their parents' home. With one's body, one can acquire all goals of life. And it is one's parents who give the body birth and sustenance. Therefore, no mortal human can repay this debt to his parents, even if he serves them for a full lifetime of 100 years. I want you to really pay attention to this. In today's day and age, people don't understand the importance of taking care of our parents. They don't understand how valuable that is, how much that is a path that is prescribed by God. In the Bible also you'll find this, honor thy mother and father. Here Krishna is saying no mortal human can repay the debt to his parents, even if he serves them for an entire lifetime of 100 years. A son who, though able to do so, fails to provide for his parents with his physical resources and wealth, is forced after death to eat his own flesh. So that's the kind of punishment that is given, right? The Vedas don't talk about going to hell, but the Datta does talk about various kinds of punishments if we don't obey the laws of God. So there are punishments, and at the same time, then we get a chance again. We're always given a second, a third, a fourth, millions of chances, in fact. A person who, though able to do so, fails to support his elderly parents, chaste wife, young child, or spiritual master, or who neglects a Brahmin or priest, or anyone who comes to him for shelter, such a person is considered dead, though breathing. Thus we, Krishna says, have wasted all these days, unable as we were to properly honor you, because our minds were always disturbed by fear of the king Kans. See, he's taking a very humble place. He was never afraid, right? He was never afraid. But he's taking a humble position. He wants to not let his parents think of him as the supreme being or God who could come and could have killed Kans. The tyrant Kans could have been killed by him in a moment. And that's exactly what happened. Dear Father and Mother, please forgive us for not serving you. We are not independent and have been greatly frustrated by cruel cunts. See, the truth, in fact, is that Krishna and Balaram spent the years of their childhood blissfully enjoying their pastimes in Vrindavan. If you haven't seen or heard the earlier episodes, well, here's a little recap for you. When Krishna comes, when the Supreme Being, the Supreme Godhead comes to this world, he comes with his loved ones. And this is Krishna with his beloved Radha, who is no different than he is. She is him, he is her. They are the divine masculine and feminine. And this is the Rasa Leela dance. So they dance, they sing, they play. They do all kinds of wonderful things. That's what life with God is like. It's not some dull, boring thing. So Krishna and Balaram spent their years in Vrindavan, first 11 years of their life, like this. Playing with their friends, dancing, singing, taking care of the cows, a simple village life. Why would he do that? To show us what it's like to be with God, to show us what it's like to return back to God, to realize that this is not our eternal home. It is with God that we have our eternal home. So, keeping that in mind, you realize that it is with all humility that he is now apologizing to his parents, his birth parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, that they could not be together in the early years of childhood. All of this is part of his plan. All of this is exactly how he wanted to have it, that he could have that time with Nanda and Yashoda, his, I guess, adopted parents, but they are actually his eternal parents. And with all the gopis, the girls of Vrindavan, with all the boys of Vrindavan, with all the men and women of Vrindavan, spent all those years with them, the most ecstatic and beautiful pastimes. And now the time had come to get rid of the king who was tormenting everyone. And so, to protect his devotees and all his loved ones, Krishna had now come to Mathura. So his parents, having heard these words, beguiled by the words of Sri Hari, the Supreme Soul of the universe, who by his internal potency appeared to be human, his parents joyfully raised him up on their laps and embraced him. So initially they weren't. Initially they were just like, bowing their heads and being very polite. But now that he presented himself as just an ordinary child, they picked him up and placed him on their lap and embraced him. Pouring out a shower of tears, his parents, their hearts filled with affection, their minds overwhelmed, their throats choked up, they could not speak. Having comforted his father and mother, the Supreme Godhead Krishna installed his maternal grandfather, Ugrasen, so from the mother's side, grandfather, as the king of the Yadus. And even here you'll see with the amount of humility that Krishna speaks, right? There's never any arrogance. There's never any sense of, oh, I'm the Almighty God. You got to worship me. No, he's taking his maternal grandfather, putting him on the throne and saying, oh, mighty king, we are your subjects. So please command us. Indeed, because of the curse of Yayati, no Yadu from our dynasty may sit on the royal throne. There was actually a curse at that time that had been put on the Yadu dynasty, Krishna's family, their dynasty. And so technically none of them could sit on the royal throne, and therefore Krishna and Balaram were supposedly disqualified. Of course, later on Krishna went on to sit on the throne and be in Dwarka as the king. But at this moment in time, he's encouraging his maternal grandfather, Ugrasen. And although Ugrasen was also part of the Yadu dynasty, but by the order of Krishna, he could sit on the royal throne. We can understand that these were all pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which he enjoyed as he played the part of a human being. Krishna said, since I am present in your entourage as your personal attendant, all the devas, the demigods, and other exalted personalities will come with heads bowed to offer you tribute. What then to speak of the rulers of men? Krishna then brought all his close family members and other relatives back from the various places to which they had fled in fear of the tyrant King Kans. He consoled them, for they were weary of living in foreign lands. This often happens, right? When you have a tyrant, you have a dictator, you have someone who is torturing and killing people indiscriminately, then people flee. They go to other countries. They seek shelter there. And the same thing had happened to Krishna's to the relatives. And so he'd call them back and consoled them, for they were weary, he says, of living in foreign lands. Then Krishna, the creator of the universe, resettled them in their homes and gratified them with valuable gifts. The members of these clans, protected by the arms of Krishna and Balaram's his brother, felt that their desires were fulfilled. They enjoyed perfect happiness while living at home with their families. They no longer suffered from the fever of material existence. Wouldn't that be nice? We don't suffer the fever of material existence. What is that fever? Do you know? It's that struggle, the struggle for survival, driving every day to work, driving back, getting a job if you don't have one, having a good enough job that you can pay your bills, maybe 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs, just so you can get by. That's the struggle for existence. And then comes old age, then comes disease, then comes death. There's so many things that we struggle for. Politics, wars, typhoons, right? There's all kinds of things going on. And it's a struggle. Human life is a struggle. But it says here, they no longer suffered from the fever of material existence. So what that means is really feeling a sense of peace, inner peace, a feeling of contentment, a feeling of satiation. And that's something we all deserve. And all that comes when we begin to associate with and surrender to God. When we go into a place of humility, we understand, my Lord, I am nothing without you. You are my everything. You are my life and my soul. And all my desires and hopes and all my dreams, I submit to you. I surrender to you. And I ask you to take care of me in any way you see fit. That is the prayer of a devotee. Not God, give me this, give me that, solve my problems, do this, do that for me. No, then you're turning God into your servant. That's not the case. That doesn't work. So every day these loving devotees could see Krishna's ever-cheerful lotus face, which was decorated with beautiful, merciful, smiling glances. Even the most elderly inhabitants of the city appeared youthful now, full of strength and vitality, for their eyes constantly drank the elixir of Krishna's lotus face. Then Krishna, along with his brother Balaram, approached King Nanda and embraced him. So now his father, who had raised him, right, from the time he was a baby all the way till now, so last 11 years or so, he was still here in Mathura. So he embraced him and he said, Father, you and Mother Yashoda have affectionately maintained us and cared for us so much. Indeed, parents love their children more than their own lives. They are the real father and mother who care for as they would their own sons, children abandoned by relatives unable to maintain and protect them, which was the case for Krishna and Balaram. Their parents could not take care of them, their birth parents, because they were in jail. And so now that Krishna and Balaram were older, they'd come back. They'd freed their parents. They'd killed the king. And now it was time to say goodbye. It was a heart-wrenching moment to say goodbye to the parents who raised them. Heartbreaking for those parents, heartbreaking. Because for the longest time they didn't even know that Krishna was actually adopted. Vasudeva had put Krishna there in the room and taken away their baby girl. And they didn't even know that's what had happened. It was only later in time they got to know that. Krishna says to his father, now you should all return to Vrindavan. we will come to see you, our dear relatives who suffer in separation from us, as soon as we have given some happiness to your well-wishing friends. Thus consoling Nanda and the other men of Vraja who had accompanied the king, the infallible Sri Krishna respectfully honored them with gifts of clothing, jewelry, household utensils, and so on. Nanda, Krishna's father, was overwhelmed with affection upon hearing Krishna's words, and his eyes brimmed with tears as he embraced the two brothers. Then he went back to Vraja with the cowherd men. If you've been following along, you know the sadness of the gopis and all of them who Krishna had to leave behind in Vrindavan when he came to Mathura. It was a very, very sad and tragic moment. And in the next episode, we'll go into how he sends his dear friend Uddhav to go and visit all of them in Vrindavan. But Krishna never actually went back. Krishna's birth father Vasudev then arranged for the Brahmin priest to perform his son's second birth initiation. So what is this second birth initiation? It's what is done when a child gets older. They are given the Brahmin thread. Now, it's interesting, Krishna was not the son of a Brahmin. He was the son of a Kshatriya, a warrior. And yet he received a second birth initiation. So the first birth is done by our parents, and the second is done by the Brahmins, or by the Guru, who give us the sacred thread and the mantra. And that is a very special ceremony that is designed to get us on the spiritual path. It looks something like that when a child is given that sacred thread. Often they shave their head, they put on the thread, and they're given the mantra. Often the Gayatri mantra is given to them to chant. Vasudev then honored the Brahmins by worshipping them and giving them, so this is done after the ceremony of the sacred thread, by worshipping the Brahmins, the priests, and giving them fine ornaments and well-ornamented cows with their calves. All those cows wore golden necklaces and linen wreaths. The boys, brothers Krishna and Balaram, then took a vow of celibacy from Gargamuni, the spiritual master of the Yadus. Concealing their innately perfect knowledge, so now they're pretending like they don't know things, they're pretending that, they're normal, ordinary kids. So concealing their innately perfect knowledge by their human-like activities, the lords of the universe, who are the origin of all branches of knowledge, next desired to reside at the school of a spiritual master, Sandipandi Muni, who lived in the city of Avanti. Sandipani Muni thought very highly of Krishna and Balaram, who served him as devotedly as one would serve the Supreme Lord himself. So the brothers were serving their guru just as one would serve God. And that's the culture. That's the culture of humility that Krishna is teaching again and again through his example. In doing so, Krishna and Balaram showed us an irreproachable example of how to worship the spiritual master. Sandipandi Muni was satisfied with their submissive behavior and taught them the entire Vedas, together with its 6 corollaries and the Upanishads. He also taught them the Dhanur Veda. Dhanur refers to the bow, the art of warfare, with its most confidential secrets, the standard books of law, the methods of logical reasoning and philosophical debate, and the 6-fold science of politics. Krishna and Balaram, being the source of all varieties of knowledge, could immediately assimilate each and every subject after hearing it explained just once. Thus, with fixed concentration, they learned the 64 arts and skills in as many days and nights. So in other words, 64 days and nights, they learned all the arts. They would have taken someone maybe 15 years or 20 years to learn. They then satisfied their spiritual master by offering him Guru Dakshina. So when a disciple learns from the Guru, he wants to give back something, depending on what he can. If in some cases the disciple has nothing, in which case he'll go out and beg alms and bring that to the Guru. But in this case, they were very special beings. And so when they asked their guru what could they give him as a gift in thanks for all that he had given them, the learned Brahmin Sandipandi Muni carefully considered the boy's glorious and amazing qualities and their superhuman intelligence. Then, after consulting with his wife, he chose as his guru dakshina, a remuneration, I guess, the return of his young son who had died in the ocean at Prabhas. So now, the guru's son had died in the ocean. When he asked for that, Krishna and Balaram said, so be it. They at once mounted their chariot and set off for Prabhas. And when they reached that place, they walked up to the shore and sat down. In a moment, the deity of the ocean, recognizing them to be the Supreme Lords, approached them with offerings of tribute. Krishna addressed the Lord of the ocean, let the son of my guru be presented at once, the one you seized here with your mighty waves. The Lord of the ocean replied, O Krishna, it was not I who abducted him, but a demonic descendant of Diti named Panchajanya, who travels in the water in the form of a conch. That demon has taken him away. Hearing this, Krishna entered the ocean, found the demon Panchajanya, who was in the shape of a conch shell, and killed him. But he did not find the boy there. Krishna and Balaram then took the conch shell that had grown around the demon's body and went back to the chariot. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, you hear of Krishna blowing his conch shell, Panchajanya. That's that. Anyways, so now they went on to the city of Shamani, the beautiful capital of Yamaraj. Yamaraj is the Lord of Death. Okay, upon arriving there with Balaram, Krishna loudly blew his conch shell. Yamaraj, who keeps the conditioned souls in check, came as soon as he heard the resounding vibration. Krishna and Balaram elaborately, it was the other way around. Yamaraj elaborately worshipped Krishna and Balaram with great devotion. And then said, O Supreme Lord Vishnu, what shall I do for you and Balaram, who are playing the part of ordinary humans? The Supreme Godhead said, suffering the bondage of his past activity, meaning due to the past karmic activity, my spiritual master's son was brought here to you, O great Yamaraj. Obey my command and bring this boy to me without delay. So you see how Krishna just goes wherever he wants, orders whoever he wants, and they follow his command. Yamaraj said, so be it, and brought forth the Guru's son. The brothers then presented the boy to their Guru, their spiritual master, and then as they did, they also said to their Guru, please select another boon. Do you want something else? The spiritual master said, my dear boys, you too have completely fulfilled the disciple's obligation to reward his spiritual master. Indeed, with disciples like you, what further desire could a Guru have? O heroes, now please return home. May your fame sanctify the world. So he's giving his blessings. May your fame sanctify the world, and may the Vedic hymns be ever fresh in your minds, both in this life and the next. Thus, receiving their Guru's permission to leave, Krishna and Balaram returned to Mathura on their chariot, which moved as swiftly as the wind and resounded like a cloud. When they entered the city, all of the citizens of Mathura rejoiced upon seeing Krishna and Balaram, whom they had not seen for many days. And you know, when you have seen God, not seeing him feels like you're in the desert with no water. It feels like your life has been taken out of you. It feels like there is nothing. You had just received the greatest thing in the world, and now it's no longer there. The people felt just like those who have lost their wealth and then regained it. Now we come to the next chapter, which goes into a very, very important and very, very important story, actually. And this is about Uddhav, Krishna's dear friend, the supremely intelligent Uddhav. He was the best counselor of the dynasty and a beloved friend of Krishna and a direct disciple of Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the guru of all gurus. The Supreme Lord Krishna is also known as Hari, one who relieves the distress of all who surrender to him. This is an important fact to know. Krishna is known as Hari, Hari, one who relieves the distress of all who surrender to him. He says this in the Bhagavad Gita too. Just surrender unto me, and I will free you from all karma, all the reactions to your past sinful actions or your karma. I will give you liberation, moksha, which in Christianity they would call salvation. He was promising this 3,000 years before Christ. I will free you from all sins, from all karma, that's the word used here, and I will give you liberation, moksha, salvation. Just surrender unto me. I promise you this. So, Krishna, who relieves the distress of all who surrender to him, one day took the hand of his fully devoted, dearmost friend Uddhav and said, Dear gentle Uddhav, go to Braja, Vrindavan, and give pleasure to our parents, as Krishna and Balaram's parents, and also relieve the gopis suffering in separation from me by giving them my message. Who are the gopis? The gopis are the cowherd girls of Vrindavan who were so madly in love with Krishna. To them he was their paramour, he was their lover, he was their beloved, he was their everything. They could not spend a moment not seeing him. They cursed the creator Brahma, who had given them eyelids that they had to blink for even a second, and in that one fragment of a second they could not see their beloved. It was that important for them to see him. And every day as he left for the fields with his cows, they'd come to see him. And every day as he returned, they would come out to see him. And then at night they'd go and be with him in the forest as they danced and played. And then there were his cowherd male friends, the boys of Vrindavan, and all the games and fun things they would do. So Krishna is now sending his dear friend Uddhav, please go back. Relieve them of their suffering. Give them a message from me. He tells Uddhav, the minds of these gopis, the cowherd girls, are always absorbed in me, and their very lives are forever devoted to me. For my sake, they have abandoned everything related to their bodies, renouncing ordinary happiness in this life, as well as the dharmic, religious duties necessary for happiness in the next life. I alone am their dearmost beloved, and indeed their very self, meaning I am no different to them than themselves. I personally sustain such devotees who, for my sake, give up all worldly duties. My dear Uddhav, for the gopis I am the most cherished object of love. Thus when they remember me and are overwhelmed by the anxiety of separation, simply because I have promised to return to them, my fully devoted girlfriends struggle to maintain their lives somehow or other. Uddhav respectfully accepted his master's message, mounted on his chariot, and set off for Vrindavan. He soon reached King Nanda's pasture. So this is Krishna's father who raised him, King Nanda. And when he reached Nanda's pastures, just as the sun was setting, and since the returning cows and other animals were raising dust with their hooves, his chariot passed unnoticed. So, there were lots of cows there. They were a dairy community. The cows were out grazing. They didn't put them in pens and feed them corn. No, they just fed on the grass. And so they were coming back, all these thousands of cows, and there was a lot of dust, and nobody saw Uddhav as he was coming. Gokul resounded, the town of Gokul resounded on all sides with the sounds of bulls fighting one another for fertile cows, with the mooing of cows chasing after their calves, with the noise of milking and of calves jumping here and there. there was a loud reverberation of flute playing and the singing of the all-auspicious deeds of Krishna and Balaram by the cowherd men and women, because they were talking about Krishna all the time. They could never forget him. They could never stop talking about him. And the whole village, yeah, and the way they dressed was so, their ornamented attire was so beautiful. The cowherd homes in Gokul appeared most charming. The flowering forest echoed with flocks of birds and swarms of bees, beautified by lakes, crowded with swans, ducks, and lotuses. As soon as Uddhav arrived at King Nanda's home, Krishna's father came forward to meet him. Remember, this is the father who raised Krishna, right? First 11 years of his life. The cowherd king embraced Uddhav in great happiness and then worshipped him as none different from Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Lord. This is the culture, that when someone guest comes to your house, you treat them with the same respect as you would if God had come to your home. After Uddhav had eaten wonderful food and been seated comfortably on a bed and been relieved of his fatigue by a foot massage and other means, Nanda inquired from him. So you don't ask right away. You first have the person eat and relieve their fatigue. And then, this is the etiquette, then you inquire after the person is well satisfied. My dear, most fortunate one, Nanda asked, does my friend Vasudeva fare well? That is Krishna's birth father. Now, does he fare well now that he is free and has rejoined his children and other relatives? Fortunately, because of his own sins, the sinful Kans has been killed. That's the king, right? Who was killed by Krishna and Balaram, along with all his brothers. He always hated the saintly and righteous Yadus, that's Krishna's dynasty. Does Krishna remember us? Does he remember his mother and his friends and well-wishers? Does he remember the cowherds and their village of Braj, of which he is the master? Does he remember the cows, the Vrindavan forest and Govardhan hill? Will Krishna, our dear Govinda, return even once to see his family? If he ever does, we may then glance upon his beautiful face with its beautiful eyes, nose, and smile. We were saved from the forest fire, the wind and rain, the bull and the serpent demons, from all such insurmountable, deadly dangers by that very great soul, Krishna. As we remember the wonderful deeds Krishna performed, his playful sidelong glances, his smiles, and his words, O Uddhav, we forget all our material engagements. When we see the places where he enjoyed his sporting pastimes, the rivers, the hills, the forests that he decorated with his feet, our minds become totally absorbed in him. You see the meditative quality of this. See how deep is that and intense is that meditation. Because meditation with absorption in God, meditation where you're focused on his pastimes, on his form, is real for us. We are people of form. We are not people of formlessness. We have a form. We relate to form. If I fall in love with someone, I fall in love with someone who has a form. I don't fall in love with some formless person who doesn't exist, who is nothing and everything. No, who's just energy. No. I fall in love with a person who has a form, right? And so when we fall in love with God, we want a God who has a form. And that form becomes our meditation. And that pastimes of what he does absorb us, captivate us. And when we hear about those, and then we can hear of nothing else. We can think of nothing else. It becomes impregnated within our mind. Just as when we chant his name, that name becomes impregnated within our mind. That I have observed. And as we talk about him, those pastimes, those teachings become part of who we are. So Nanda does not know who Krishna really is. He says, in my opinion, Krishna and Balaram must be two exalted demigods. Not the Supreme Being, not God, but some exalted demigods who have come to this planet to fulfill some great mission. Such was foretold by Garga Rishi, the great saint Garga. After all, Krishna and Balaram killed Kans, who was as strong as 10,000 elephants, as well as the wrestlers Chanur and Mushtik. They killed them all sportingly, as easily as a lion disposes of small animals. In case you haven't seen the pictures, I'll just show them to you again. So that's Krishna killing Kans. And that's the big elephant Kovalyapid who was sent to kill Krishna, who Krishna picked up, lifted him, twirled him around with his trunk and killed him. Stood on his head. Oh no, actually he pulled out his tooth and then stabbed him with that tooth, because this powerful elephant was sent to kill Krishna and his brother Balaram. And he would have stomped them to death, because that's what his handler was having him do. And then there were the wrestlers, Chanur and Mushtik, who had been sent to kill Krishna and Balaram too. And they easily, young boys as they were, easily killed the two wrestlers. And then more wrestlers came after them. And none of them were successful. And finally Krishna ended up killing the king. So, with the ease of a royal elephant breaking a stick, Krishna broke a powerful giant bow. He also held a mountain aloft for 7 days with just one hand. Not just one hand, with the left hand pinky finger he held up the Mount Govardhan hill for 7 days and 7 nights. Here in Vrindavan, Krishna and Balaram easily destroyed demons like Pralambasura, Dhenuka, Arista, Trinavarta and Baka, who had themselves defeated both demigods and other demons, thus intensely remembering Krishna again and again. King Nanda, his mind completely attached to his beloved Krishna, felt extreme anxiety and fell silent, overcome by the strength of his love. As Mother Yashoda heard the descriptions of her son's activities, she poured out her tears and milk flowed from her breasts out of love. Now, Uddhav, remember, is a great intellectual. So he joyfully addressed King Nanda. He thought he's going to rescue these people. He thought he's going to save them. He thought he's going to enlighten them. He thought that he could help them with his lectures, with his philosophy, with his great knowledge and gyan. So having clearly seen the supreme loving attraction that Nanda and Yashoda felt for Krishna, Uddhav said, "O respectful Nanda, certainly you and Mother Yashoda are the most praiseworthy persons in the entire world, since you have developed such a loving attitude toward Narayan, the supreme master of all living beings." You see, for Uddhav, Krishna was not just some little boy. He was the supreme being. He knew that. He was aware of that. Uddhav was fully aware that the Supreme Lord had incarnated in human form. He was Narayan, he was Vishnu, and he was here as in the form of Krishna. But Nanda and Yashoda, who had raised him, did not know that. Krishna did not want them to know that. And here, Uddhav is trying to enlighten Krishna's parents with this knowledge. That no, your child is the supreme being, supreme Godhead, the supreme Lord of and the creator of the entire universe, the spiritual master of all living beings. These two, Krishna and Balaram, are the supreme Lord, and they are each the seed and the womb of the universe, the creator and his creative potency. They enter the hearts of all living beings and control their conditioned awareness. Krishna and Balaram are the Paramatma, the super soul, who are there in every living being. They enter the hearts of living beings and control their conditioned awareness. Krishna says, I am seated, this is in the Bhagavad Gita, I am seated in everyone's heart. And from me alone comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So if you want to remember me, I will show you the way. If you want to forget me, I will help you do that. And if you want remembrance of me, if you want to remember who I am, I will help you with that too. So knowledge, remembrance, and forgetful. And how does he do it? He's seated in your heart. He is present in every atom of the creation. He is seated within your heart. And he exists as a being that has his own planet, his own universe for that matter. And he resides there and he comes here frequently. Well, for us, it might be very infrequent because we only have 100-year lifespans. But for him, if he came 5,000 years ago, he comes millennium after millennium, so that's frequently, to be able to show us who he is. There is no guesswork needed. There is no imagination or speculation or interpretation needed. He makes it very clear. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what it's like to be with me. Come if you want. You're most welcome. I want to invite you to be with me. So he continues, saying that they are in the hearts of every living beings, and they are the primeval, the original, supreme. Anyone, even a person in an impure state, who absorbs his mind in these two brothers, Krishna and Balaram, for just a moment at the time of death, burns up all traces of sinful reactions and immediately attains the supreme transcendental destination in a pure spiritual form as effulgent as the sun. Try to understand this. Krishna says that wherever and whatever your mind is fixed upon at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will go. So if you are thinking of him, if you are thinking of God at the moment of death, you will go to God. But you will not be able to do that. Because if you've spent your entire life thinking of other things, wanting wealth, enjoyment of the senses, pleasures of all kinds of the world, well, then that's what you're going to think of, because that's what you're going to miss. You're going to want that. You're going to remember that. Your life will flash before you, and that's what will be in your mind. But if in your mind you have been placing the pastimes of Krishna, the name of Krishna, then that's what you will remember at the time of leaving this body. So he says here that one who remembers him just even for a moment at the time of death burns up all traces of sinful reactions and karma and immediately attains the supreme transcendental destination. In what way does one go to God? He says, in a pure spiritual form, not in a material form. You leave this body behind, but you go in a pure spiritual form. Your soul takes a spiritual form, which is as effulgent, as bright as the sun. He says, you, Nanda and Yashoda, you too have rendered exceptional loving service to him, Narayan, the Supersoul, the Paramatma of all, and the cause of all existence. He is so much in his knowledge. He does not in his heart. He doesn't understand the pain of these two. He doesn't understand the love that they have. He is in his jnana, his knowledge. And he's trying to intellectualize. You know how it is when you intellectualize to an emotional person? It doesn't work. It does not work. Talk to someone whose family member has died or been lost or who's grieving and try intellectualizing with them. It doesn't go anywhere. It is a lost cause. So that's what is happening here. He says, you have rendered great service, loving service to him, Narayan, the super soul of all and the cause of all existence. The great soul who, although the original cause of everything, has a human-like form. What pious deeds could still be required of you? He says, you don't need to do anything further. You've done a lot, he's saying. Infallible Krishna. So read this word. Infallible Krishna. He's infallible, means he's flawless. We are fallible. We are flawed. This is a very important distinction to make. Our soul is infallible too. God is infallible. We want to be perfect because that's our nature, the nature of our soul, not the nature of our human existence. That's the mistake we make. We're trying to become perfect as a human being. That will never happen. The imperfect human that we are will never become perfect. And the perfect soul that we are will never become imperfect. Similarly, God is infallible, has no flaws. Infallible Krishna, he says, the Lord of the devotees, will soon return to Braja, to Vrindavan, to satisfy his parents and everyone he loves here. Having killed Kants, the enemy of all the Yadus in the wrestling arena, Krishna will now surely fulfill his promise by coming back to you. O most fortunate ones, do not lament. You will see Krishna again very soon. He is present in the heart of all living beings, just as fire lies dormant in wood. The example is lovely, but it is not pleasing to these people. For him, for Krishna, no one is no one is especially dear or despicable, superior or inferior, and yet he is not indifferent to anyone. He is free from all desire for respect and yet gives respect to all others. You must have noticed this. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says the same thing. Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. Expect no respect from others and yet give all respect to everyone. In such a state of mind, being more tolerant than a tree, be willing, one can chant the name of God constantly. One can be linked with God constantly. How? Through humility. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim. We have to be very clear to neither desire wealth, nor the opposite sex, nor prestige, nor respect. See, we all want respect. We all want wealth. We all want to enjoy with someone of the opposite sex, or the same sex if that's your preference. We all want to enjoy our senses, but one who is willing to put all that aside and devote themselves to God, one who is willing to give up everything for God. It doesn't mean that you don't have a home. It doesn't mean you don't have a house or a car or a job or any. You can have everything, but don't be attached to anything. Recognize that none of it is yours. Everything is God's. He has given you everything to use, to be in this world, but none of it is mine. Don't fall into the trap of mine. This is not my home. No, this is not even my body. This was all given to me. It's there for me to use and engage in God's service. That's the correct way to look at it. So, becoming free of I, this is who I am. Me, this is who my family and loved ones are. And mine, all that I possess. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitamba, jagadisha kamaya, mama janmani janmani ishwari. I want Krishna. He says, I want nothing except to serve you life after life. I have no other desire. That is the prayer of a pure devotee. And someone who will become very dear to God. See, even in romantic love, we say that I want no one except you. I want nothing except you. You are my greatest treasure. You are the one I care for above all else. And everything I do it for you. And that is the essence of love of God. So it says here, Krishna himself is free from all desire. He desires nothing, and he certainly does not desire respect. And yet he gives respect to all others. He models the very behavior that will help elevate us in our consciousness. And now he's getting really philosophical, okay, with her. He has no mother, no father, no wife, children, or other relatives. No one is related to him, and yet no one is a stranger to him. He has no material body and no birth. He has no karmic work to do in this world that would oblige or bind him to take birth in any species of life. Yet, to enjoy his pastimes and deliver his saintly devotees, he manifests himself. Although beyond the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the unborn, transcendental, supreme Lord utilizes the material modes, that is this world, to create, maintain, and destroy them as his play. Just as a person who is whirling around perceives the ground to be turning, one who is affected by false ego thinks himself the doer. which actually only his mind, when only his mind is acting. So let's be very clear about what this is. As a person who is whirling around perceives the ground to be turning. So is the ground turning when you're turning round and round? No. You're turning, your mind now goes into a whirl and thinks everything around you is turning, but in fact, nothing is turning. The earth is not turning, the trees are not turning, the people are not turning. It's your mind that is now turning. It says, in much the same way, a person who is affected by the false ego, there's the real ego is to know that I'm a servant of God, and the false ego is to think that I am this body, I am the enjoyer, I am here to have a wonderful time, this is my life, as they say, right? So one who is affected by this false ego, I, me, and mine, thinks himself the doer, when actually only his mind is acting. It's only this illusion being created by his mind. The Supreme Lord is certainly not your son alone. He is the son, the soul, the father and mother of everyone. Uddhav continues with his knowledge and gyan. Nothing can be said to exist independent of him. Nothing heard or seen, nothing in the past, present, or future, nothing moving or unmoving, great or small. He indeed is everything, for he is the Supreme Soul. While Uddhav continued speaking with Nanda, the night ended. With that, we'll stop, and I would love for you to contemplate. What is it like as you hear this? What is the mood of Nanda, who is listening, who is deeply in love with Krishna as his son? And when he's hearing all this, none of this is making any sense. My son, I've known him since he was a baby. He crawled. We fed him. His mother suckled him in her breast. We punished him when he was naughty. His mother even went after him with a stick. We saw him do all kinds of silly things. How can that be God? That's not possible. What are you talking about? I know he's got great powers, and it seems like he can, kill all kinds of bad guys who come along, and he seems to be very powerful, no doubt. But he can't be God. It's not possible. Nanda loves Krishna as his own child. And this is the influence of Yogamaya. Yogamaya, as we said earlier, is Krishna's internal potency. It will not let Nanda look beyond this fact that Krishna is my son. What are you talking about, Uddhav? You don't know anything. Now, this particular conversation will go to the next level in our next episode, where Uddhav will go and meet with the gopis, with the cowherd girls of Vrindavan. And he's going to try to convince them with his logic about who Krishna is. And we're going to see in that exchange what happens. It's going to be quite fascinating. This is the time when he speaks to Radha and to the gopis. Oh, Krishna is God. But you see, when God wants someone to love him, he doesn't want them to think of him as God. He wants to love you as you are, and he wants to be loved as he is. He wants to be loved because he's adorable, not because he's something great. No. That is not intimacy. That is formality. That is not deep, intimate love for God. That is formal, where you put God on a pedestal, and God is great and we are small. No, that is not true love of God. Anyway, I'd love to have your thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. And if you're here live on Instagram, please write it down. If you are listening in the later on at YouTube or Instagram and would like to write down something in the comments, please do. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's see, we seem to have a good comment here. Beautiful thought. Swati, what was that all about? What did you write? What was the thought that you referred to as the beautiful thought? Do you remember? Would you like me to unmute? Okay, why don't you come on in and hold on a second. love to have you in here. And let's see. Okay. How do I get you? All right. You want to say something?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
And how do I? Mm-hmm.
No, that comment was just with regard to the last 2, 3 sentences you spoke about adoring God versus like putting him on a pedestal and worshiping Krishna, so it's like, yeah, I love the concept of intimacy. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
by
And to me,
befriending Krishna, not putting him on a pedestal, right? Like
right.
that, yeah.
So being able to see him as, to understand that he's wanting a really deep and close relationship with us. That's what he's wanting. He's wanting us to be able to love him as he is, not because of who he is, right? Just like we want to be loved. We don't want to be loved. Just let's say you're a very wealthy person. Let's say you're a multimillionaire or something. Do you want to be loved because you're a multimillionaire, or do you want to be loved because of who you are? Right? I mean, everyone who has something extraordinary faces this problem. If you're extraordinarily beautiful, you face this problem. You say, the guys only like me because of the way I look. Or if you're very wealthy, you'll complain, no, they only like me because of, the money I have. And if I didn't have this money, they wouldn't love me. So nobody wants to be loved for what they have. They want to be loved for who they are, with or without that.
Right.
Because look, even if you have beauty, you're going to get old one day. If you have money, you never know. The economy could go up or down. You don't know what's going to happen. So in all these things, we need to know this is how God is. That we are the way we are because we are the way. In many ways, we have the attributes at the core. We have the attributes that God has. So thank you for saying that. Really appreciate it. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Swati, anything yourself?
No, that was
That's it? All right. Anyone
Beautiful.
else got any comments? Thank you. And do catch up on the earlier episodes. We've had so many wonderful episodes, so do catch up there. And love to know your thoughts. Feel free to write in the comments as well, because I love to answer your questions. Anyone who's got any questions, you're listening now or later, please feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. Okay, with that, we'll wind up. I'll see you back again. I'm here every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, I think it's daylight savings time is about to start, so it'll probably become 8:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. Okay, with that, good night, and I'll see you next week.